The story you are about to experience is a work of fiction. While it draws inspiration from Native American culture and folklore, it is not intended to be a historically accurate portrayal of Native American history or traditions. All characters, events, and depictions are the product of creative interpretation and should be viewed as such. We deeply respect and honor the diverse cultures and histories of indigenous peoples.
Attic Studio Productions presents a Skull Hunter book series audiobook, A Haunted Past, written by S. Michael Lear. Copyright 2024. A Haunted Past, Part 1. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm hues across the room, Frederick Dillette found himself perched on the edge of the expansive bed, his gaze a mixture of adoration and familiarity fixed upon his wife, Janice. The soft amber light seemed to dance upon her as she sat before her ornate makeup table, each stroke of the brush weaving through her fine red hair with gentle precision. 7 years of marriage had not dulled his appreciation for the ethereal beauty that stared back at him through the delicately curved oval mirror. Draped in a gown that merged elegance with allure, Janice wore a long lace sleeping attire that cascaded just off her shoulder. The gown's delicate touch played a symphony with her graceful curves, igniting a spark of desire within Frederick. The hint of exposed skin held a promise of intimacy that sent a shiver down his spine. An enigmatic grin curved his lips as romantic thoughts danced behind his eyes, twinkling like distant stars. Janice, catching the glint of mischief in Frederick's gaze, paused in her hair-combing ritual. She knew that look well, a look that often signaled whispered promises and shared secrets. "What do you have on your mind?" she inquired, her voice a velvety blend of curiosity and playfulness. Frederick's response was an artful facade of innocence, punctuated by a playful shrug. "Me? I don't have a thought in the world." Her laughter, a mellifluous melody, filled the room, resonating with the countless moments they had shared. Janice's fingers finished their delicate chore with her hair, and the room seemed to hum with the harmony of their connection. As if on cue, the bedroom door swung open, revealing their 5-year-old son, Alex, clutching a well-worn stuffed bear. The atmosphere shifted, the tranquility of their moment temporarily set aside. "Father, it's time." Alex's voice, tinged with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty, pierced the air. Frederick's thoughts momentarily clung to the realm of his intimate reverie. His gaze locked with Janice's, a fleeting exchange that spoke of unspoken promises and future moments to be shared. With a sigh of resignation, he rose from the edge of the bed, a reluctant smile shaping his lips. "Do we have to, my little bear?" Janice's eyes twinkled with understanding, her expression a silent reassurance that she would be there when he returned. "Oh, go on." Her words were accompanied by a playful wink. "I'll be waiting." With a sense of unity, father and son crossed the hallway to Alex's room. The boy's anticipation was palpable, his small form disappearing under the covers with a mix of excitement and comfort. Perched on the edge of the bed, Frederick lifted the covers to Alex's chin, his touch tender and affectionate. The transition from their room to Alex's felt like a bridge between the intimacy of husband and wife and the responsibilities of parenthood. "You know," Frederick's voice carried a gentle assurance, "there will come a time when you won't need me to check for monsters anymore." "But you make the monsters go away." Alex's eyes brimmed with earnestness, his voice carrying the plea of a child who believed in his father's magical abilities. With a playful grin, Frederick responded, his fingers dancing across Alex's side, evoking joyful laughter. "So, you're saying my face is so funny That it scares the monsters away? The laughter transformed into giggles as Alex squirmed under his father's touch, a testament to the unique bond they shared. "Okay, let's make sure those monsters stay away," Frederick announced, his movements mirroring an adventurer's preparation. With theatrical flair, he knelt beside the bed, lifting the covers slowly, and then, with a dramatic flourish, whipped his head beneath them. "Get out of here, you monsters!" he mock-yelled, emerging with a triumphant grin. "All clear." "Remember the closet, Dad?" Alex chimed in, his voice a blend of playfulness and apprehension. Frederick's grin widened as he approached the closet door, his fingers wrapping around the doorknob. With a theatrical swing, he opened the closet, and Alex buried himself beneath the covers, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Frederick's exploration of the closet's depths was met with animated gestures. His exaggerated movements met with a mix of trepidation and curiosity from Alex. The verdict was delivered with an exuberant flourish, Frederick emerging from the closet with a reassuring smile. "No monsters hiding here, my brave little warrior." A tender kiss planted on Alex's forehead marked the end of their nightly ritual. As Frederick turned to leave, Alex's voice quivered with vulnerability. "Father, you don't think I'm silly, do you?" Frederick's smile softened, his eyes alight with a blend of love and understanding. "No. In fact, I'll miss it when you grow up and don't need me to check anymore." "Father, don't you check under your bed at night?" Alex's voice carried a mixture of curiosity and vulnerability, his eyes shimmering in the dim light of the hallway. With a smile that held a mix of gratitude and assurance, Alex burrowed deeper into his covers, the last rays of light casting a gentle glow on his peaceful face. "Not since I was your age. Now, good night," said Frederick, his words carrying a gentle resonance as he flipped the light switch and gently closed the door. The soft click seemed to mark the end of their nightly ritual, the reassurance he had imparted resonating in the stillness of the room. He hurried across the hallway, each step filled with the weight of both fatherly duties and a heart yearning for the warmth of his wife's embrace. In their room, Janice lay nestled in the bed, a vision of comfort and serenity. Her eyes, twinkling with a mischievous glint, lifted as Frederick entered. The moment was an unspoken affirmation of their shared intimacy, a connection that transcended words. "Is Alex asleep?" Janice's voice held a hushed curiosity, as if they were conspirators in a nighttime secret. "Snug as a bug in a rug." Frederick's laughter spilled forth, a joyful melody that danced through the room. As he slipped into bed beside his wife, a rush of familiarity washed over him, a comforting tide that enveloped them both. The scent of her perfume, sweet and enchanting, stirred his senses, each note a reminder of the love that bound them. Pulling her close, Frederick's arms encircled Janice, drawing her into an affectionate embrace. Their lips met a tender kiss that echoed the intimacy of their connection. Yet, within the intimacy, a shift occurred. His wife's body stiffened as an abrupt constriction seemed to tighten around Janice's legs. Frederick's heart raced as he felt the unexpected tension, and in a heartbeat, the embrace was broken. A startled cry escaped Janice's lips, the moment shattered by her sudden distress. "Something's grabbing my feet." Janice's wide eyes mirrored her shock, her words punctuated by a mixture of confusion and alarm. Frederick's gaze locked onto his wife, his mind grappling to comprehend the unfolding chaos. Before he could react, a force seemed to yank Janice under the covers, pulling her downward to the foot of the bed. The sheets twisted and tangled in a frenzied and swift motion. Frederick tore them away, flinging the fabric to the floor. A symphony of screams filled the air as Janice's fingers clawed at the bed, desperate for purchase. Frederick lunged forward, his fingers wrapping around Janice's arms, his strength summoned in a desperate bid to rescue her. But the lotion on her skin made her elusive, slippery in his grasp. In a desperate attempt to gain better leverage, Frederick loosened his grip, only to find himself in a battle against an invisible force. Janice's screams pierced the air as she was dragged beneath the bed, her voice a chilling echo of terror. Frederick's adrenaline surged as he leaped from the bed, his actions fueled by a primal instinct. The mattress toppled in his wake, and then, as he stared down at the spot where his wife had vanished, he was met with a vision that defied all logic. A wispy trail of smoke curled upward, accompanied by a single delicate feather. The room seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy, the air heavy with the weight of the inexplicable. The scene was too much to bear, the sight too overwhelming for Frederick's mind to process. He sank to his knees, his heart-rending wails reverberating through the room, a mournful cry for the love that had been torn away. Amidst the turmoil, the door creaked open, revealing a small figure, their son, Alex. A Haunted Past, Part 2. Still nursing sore muscles and a weary spirit, Rick Vargo methodically unpacked his meager belongings onto the time-worn gray cot that had been set up for him in the secluded back room. The remnants of his office were a chaotic testament to the havoc wreaked by a fire that had consumed it just last month. The charred remains served as haunting evidence of a life upended by forces beyond his control. The building's owner, a man seemingly impervious to empathy, had shown no haste in facilitating Rick's return to his workspace. Instead, their interactions had been marked by heated arguments, the owner unleashing a barrage of verbal abuse, each word a venomous reminder that he deemed Rick an unacceptable risk. The circumstances, however, had not unfolded in the landlord's favor. The firm grip of a signed lease held Rick's position in place, an unyielding anchor that defied the owner's ill will. As he gingerly unfolded a shirt, memories of his clash with the owner's temper flitted across his mind. The confrontation had left a lingering bitterness, a testament to the friction between them. Yet, despite the heated exchange, the resilience born of necessity had enabled Rick to secure a temporary sanctuary within the building's labyrinthine recesses. Sam, the building's night watchman, had emerged as an unexpected beacon of compassion in this otherwise bleak scenario. An old army cot, weathered by years of use, had found its way from Sam's home to the small utility room Rick now inhabited. The gesture, born of kindness and sympathy, held an undeniable solace within its simplicity. Multiple offers had been extended by Sam, a genuine invitation to take refuge within the warmth of his home. Rick, however, had declined each time with heartfelt gratitude. His reluctance had nothing to do with Sam's character, but everything to do with his own sense of responsibility. He could not, in good conscience, place someone as kind-hearted as Sam in the line of fire that perpetually followed him, a burden he'd carried long before the flames ravaged his office. A quiet sigh escaped Rick's lips as his fingers traced a jagged scar that marred his right forearm, a lasting reminder of a painful encounter. The memory of his first meeting with Alistair Bent, an individual who personified darkness and danger, resurfaced with chilling clarity. Their paths had crossed in a cataclysmic clash, leaving Rick battered and bruised, his body a canvas painted with scars that bore witness to their violent encounter. The scar beneath his sleeve, a deep groove etched into his skin, was a permanent mark of their introduction, an indelible reminder that their enmity was bound to endure. Rick's thoughts drifted to the present, where the looming presence of Alistair Bent hung heavy over his life. The mention of the name sent a shiver down his spine, a visceral reaction to the sinister force that sought him relentlessly. The scars and bruises that adorned his body bore testimony to Alistair's merciless pursuit. With a resigned breath, Rick traced the outline of the scar once more, a gesture of acknowledgement for the life he had chosen, a life riddled with shadows, danger, and the constant threat of violence. As his fingers lingered on the mark, he murmured, "Such is the life of the skull hunter." The back room was dimly lit, the feeble light revealing the cot where Rick Vargo had been organizing his meager belongings. Just as he was settling in, the door swung open with a creak, and a familiar voice sliced through the stillness. "Everything okay, Mr. Vargo?" Sam's face appeared in the doorway, the perpetual smile that adorned it capable of withstanding even the darkest clouds. Sam possessed an air of perpetual optimism, an unwavering belief that no problem was insurmountable. Rick found himself admiring that quality, even if it also had a knack for irritating him on occasion. Rick looked up, his eyes meeting Sam's. "Yeah, great. Couldn't be better," he replied with a touch of dry humor, hanging his weathered hat on a rusted nail by the door. "There's a phone call for you at the front desk. It's that policeman, Detective Sergeant Brogan." Rick's internal groan was nearly audible. Brogan was a hulking cop who seemed to relish making Rick's life difficult. Yet, begrudgingly, Rick acknowledged that Brogan had been instrumental in saving his life. Memories resurfaced of the night Alistair Bent had left him for dead in a desolate alley, and Brogan had been the one to discover him. The burly detective had rushed Rick to the hospital, where he'd maintained a vigil at his bedside until consciousness returned. Then came the relentless barrage of questions, a week of grueling interrogation to which Rick could provide no satisfying answers. "All right, let's go," Rick muttered, grabbing his hat and coat before joining Sam near the phone. He lifted the receiver, a sense of trepidation clutching at him as he heard Brogan's heavy breathing on the other end. "What do you want?" "I told you everything in the hospital." Rick's voice was tinged with frustration, weariness etched into every word. "Stow it, Vargo," Brogan's voice rumbled, gravelly and unwavering. "This ain't business. I need you to come down to the precinct." Rick's eyebrow arched skeptically, his skepticism evident even through the phone. "What's the charge this time?" he sneered. "Damn it, Vargo." Brogan's patience seemed to be wearing thin. "I said this ain't business. It's personal. Just come down here right now, or I'll send half the cops in the city to pick you up." With a begrudging sigh, Rick relented. All right, I'll be there," he muttered, the sound of Brogan slamming the phone down on the other end ringing in his ear. Sam, attuned to Rick's mood, watched him closely. "Anything the matter?" Sam's concern was genuine, his eyes reflecting his empathy. Rick's gaze fixed on the phone for a moment before he slowly hung it up. "I don't know," he replied, a touch of uncertainty in his voice. "But you can be sure if Brogan's involved. It can't be good." The weight of history and the murky ties between them infused those words, casting a shadow of anticipation over Rick's thoughts. Detective Sergeant Brogan operated out of the 21st Precinct, nestled in the heart of Lawrence City. It stood as a chaotic hub of urban life, simultaneously the most bustling, sordid, and treacherous precinct to serve. Its doors swung wide to admit the city's collection of miscreants, lowlifes, and ne'er-do-wells, each marking the building's worn floors with the traces of their desperate lives. But within its grimy walls, the city's police force endured a precarious dance with fate, their mortality rate a grim testament to the perils of the profession. The precinct's survival required its officers to mirror the hardness and ugliness of the criminals they confronted daily. A brutal symbiosis where only the toughest could prevail. Brogan exemplified this hardness. His fearlessness was renowned, a reputation that prompted most to steer clear of him whenever possible. The echo of Brogan's voice lingered in Rick's mind, a discordant note that hinted at something awry. The detective's tone bore an unfamiliar edge, an underlying tension that set Rick's nerves on edge. Something had perturbed Brogan, and the mere notion was enough to unnerve Rick. He parked his car across the street from the precinct, observing the incessant ebb and flow of activity. Time was a fluid concept within the 21st's walls, where the relentless parade of humanity persisted ceaselessly. It was a place of constant motion, a cacophonous symphony of shouts and sirens that seemed to drown out the concept of stillness. Entering the building, Rick was met with a sensory overload. The air was thick with tension, punctuated by the shrill cries of those who sought justice or refuge, and the curt, often frustrated responses of the officers. It was a chaotic ballet, a daily struggle for control over a narrative that seemed to teeter perpetually between innocence and guilt. The uniform one wore determined whether they advocated for the accused or the accusers, a duality that underscored the precinct's relentless churn. Rick approached the main desk, his steps measured against the backdrop of chaos. A stocky gray-haired cop was engrossed in the shuffling of papers, his eyes obscured by the thin glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. The bold red stripes on his sleeve declared his rank. Sergeant. Before Rick could utter a word, a forceful shove sent him stumbling to the side. A police officer was in the throes of handling a struggling individual, slamming the man's face onto the unyielding surface of the desk. The scene was emblematic of the precinct's frenetic existence, a glimpse into the daily struggle to maintain order within an environment teetering on the edge of chaos. "Hey, Sarge, this guy would like to turn in a purse he found on the street, wouldn't ya?" The officer's grip on the man's head forced his attention towards the desk sergeant, his face contorted in discomfort. Yeah, I found it," the man muttered, blood trickling from his nose, a testament to the forceful encounter. "McPherson, how many times do I have to tell you not to get blood on my desk? Now take this civic-minded individual to the lost and found department in the basement." "Sure thing, Sarge," the officer complied, hoisting the man to his feet. A sly grin crept onto the officer's face. "You want I should take a picture of him, you know, for the papers?" "Of course," the desk sergeant's response dripped with sarcasm. "The owner might want to give him a little reward. Now, get him out of here." With that, the officer led the man away, their forms blending into the chaotic backdrop of the precinct. Peering over the rim of his glasses, the desk sergeant's gaze shifted to Vargo. "And what can we do for you?" he inquired, his voice bearing the weight of years spent navigating the turbulent sea of the 21st Precinct. "Get your ass in here, Vargo!" Brogan's voice reverberated through the room, a command that cut through the clamor of the precinct. A curt gesture from the sergeant indicated the hallway. Rick tipped his hat in acknowledgement and threaded his way through the bustling throng, his path leading to a doorway where Brogan awaited. The detective's usual hat was absent, revealing a tuft of disheveled gray hair atop his head. Despite the lack of headgear, his visage retained that distinct air of sternness. "What's all this about?" Rick inquired as he entered the small, windowless room. Positioned at a table was a man with dark hair, his face contorted with a reddened hue that suggested recent tears. The holster slung over the man's shoulder signaled his affiliation with the police force, clearly not your typical visitor. "Take a seat, Vargo," Brogan's gruff tone accompanied the gesture of him practically flinging a chair in Rick's direction. "This is my partner, Dillette, Fred Dillette. He's the reason I called you." Seating himself, Rick leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Brogan, having ignited a cigarette, took his place in the corner behind Rick, an enigmatic presence looming over the proceedings. Dillette, his gaze fixed on the table, seemed a man burdened by a weight he could barely shoulder. The air was thick with a palpable sense of anguish. His shoulders hunched, as if he carried a world of sorrow within. "Brogan said you might be able to help me." Dillette's voice was a hushed murmur laden with desperation. His words bore the vulnerability of someone who had lost their way, the very essence of their existence slipping through their fingers. Rick, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, regarded Dillette with a mix of empathy and uncertainty. "I don't know. What's the problem?" He responded, his tone a measured attempt to navigate a situation he had yet to fully comprehend. As Brogan lingered in the corner, a silent sentinel of support, Rick waited for the tale to unfold, a sense of foreboding casting its shadow over the room. Something I can't explain. Took my wife tonight." Dillette's voice trembled as he uttered the words, his gaze lifting to meet Rick's. The anguish etched on his face was raw and undeniable, his features inflamed from the weight of grief. Rick's brow furrowed, concern evident in his eyes. "What do you mean, something?" He probed gently, hoping to uncover the elusive truth behind Dillette's cryptic words. A sudden eruption shattered the tension as Dillette surged from his chair, his fist crashing onto the table in a surge of frustration. "Just what I said, damn it! Something!" His voice crackled with an edge of desperation, his emotions exposed in the heat of the moment. He turned away from Rick, his gaze fixed upon the blank wall as if seeking solace in its featureless expanse. I don't know what it was." His words were a breathless whisper, carrying a sense of disbelief. "We were in our bedroom when she screamed that something had her legs. It dragged her under the bed." The narrative tumbled from his lips, each word laden with the weight of terror. Dillette's narrative seemed to fracture, and Rick could sense the depths of his confusion and fear. "I threw the mattress off, but when I looked, she was gone. I tried to help her, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't." His voice faltered, and he lowered his head into his trembling hands, his frame convulsed by sobs. Rick sat in stunned silence, a swirl of thoughts and emotions vying for dominance within him. Before him, this tall, seemingly unbreakable man crumbled beneath the weight of grief, a stark contrast to the image he had projected just moments ago. Rick struggled to find the right words, his usual fluency forsaking him in the face of such unexpected vulnerability. As if sensing the need for intervention, Brogan stepped forward, his presence a silent reassurance. He seated himself at the table, and the air around him transformed from stern authority to something resembling empathy, a shift Rick had never witnessed before. Brogan's demeanor softened, almost approaching a semblance of humanity, albeit with the same tenacity that defined his character. At that moment, the trio existed in a fragile equilibrium, a storm of emotions swirling beneath the surface as they embarked on a journey into the unknown. "Look, Vargo, you don't like me and I don't like you, but this is out of my league." Brogan's voice carried an undercurrent of begrudging admission. The tension between them was palpable, a long-standing rivalry overshadowing the matter at hand. "You know I don't buy into all this mumbo-jumbo you've been preaching," Brogan continued, his skepticism evident. "Hell, I think you're nothing but a scam artist." Rick's retort was swift, laced with a hint of sarcasm. "Thanks. Are you going somewhere with all this flattery?" The room brimmed with unspoken tension, their uneasy truce momentarily forgotten. Brogan rose from his seat, his movements purposeful as he reached for something on a nearby table. He placed a feather on the table in front of Rick, a single piece that held an air of intrigue. "We found this in a puddle of blood under the bed." Brogan's tone held a trace of gravity. "Ever seen anything like it?" His gaze fixed on Rick, a challenge implicit in his question. Taking the feather into his hand, Rick turned it slowly, his fingers exploring its texture and form. The feather measured about 8 inches in length, and its hues were a complex mixture of dark shades. Its end bore a roughness, as if it had been haphazardly trimmed with a knife. A sense of curiosity tugged at Rick, and as his grip tightened, a vision unfurled before him, a cascade of images that transcended time and reality. In his mind's eye, Rick found himself atop a horse, galloping through a sun-dappled field. The wind kissed his skin, and the scent of nature enveloped him in a soothing embrace. The scene shifted, and a young woman with an ethereal countenance emerged. She sat by a crackling fire, offering sustenance with a smile that seemed to emanate warmth. Words flowed from her lips in an unfamiliar tongue, yet her presence transcended language. As her hand brushed against his, an inexplicable spark ignited, flooding him with a sensation of warmth and connection. The vision morphed once more, and Rick's gaze fell upon the same woman, her face now devoid of life's vitality. Blood matted her hair, a bruise encircling her throat, a haunting tableau that conveyed a tragic fate. His hands cradled her lifeless form, a silent lament for a future snuffed out. A sudden crescendo of sound echoed in his mind, a primal scream that sent a shiver down his spine. The vision culminated in the visage of a wild-eyed man, his face painted in a frenzied display, charging towards Rick with a menacing axe. The abruptness of his return to reality jolted Rick, his body recoiling in his chair. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he swayed precariously. Brogan's timely intervention prevented his fall, his solid grip ensuring Rick remained upright. The room spun with a disorienting intensity, his senses still reeling from the vivid tapestry that had unfolded before him. "Vargo!" Brogan's voice pierced the air, a summons that cut through the weight of contemplation. Rick's gaze shifted to Brogan, the residue of the vision still clinging to his thoughts, sending a shiver down his spine. The vividness of the experience had left an unsettling impression on him, a sensation he couldn't easily shake. "That's an Indian feather," he stated with conviction, the words punctuated by the firm drop of the feather onto the table. The vision had served as a warning, and he had no intention of inviting another. Brogan's brows furrowed, a mix of confusion and incredulity coloring his features. "A what? How the hell did an Indian feather show up under his bed?" Rick met Brogan's gaze with an unwavering resolve. "I don't know, but trust me, that's what it is, and the owner is really pissed off." Dillette, his desperation palpable, turned to Rick, his voice tinged with a mix of frustration and fear. "What the hell are you saying that some Indian stole my wife?" The weight of uncertainty hung heavy in the air, Rick grappling for answers to questions he himself barely understood. "I'm saying that I don't know what happened to your wife. I need to go to the place where she was taken to get more." Brogan's resolve solidified, his determination unwavering. "Then that's where we're going," he declared, pushing his chair back and striding toward the door. A quiver ran through Dillette's form, his vulnerability laid bare for all to see. "I can't," his voice trembled, his entire being shaken by the mere thought of returning to the scene of the inexplicable tragedy. "I can't go back there, not ever." Rick's gaze softened as it settled on Dillette, an unexpected swell of compassion rising within him. The man before him was broken, a fractured soul clinging to the remnants of his shattered reality. Despite his reservations, Rick felt an inexplicable conviction that Dillette needed to be there in that place of turmoil. "You have to," he insisted, his words gentle yet unwavering. He couldn't pinpoint the source of this conviction, but it felt undeniable. Brogan, the embodiment of strength, approached Dillette, his massive hand coming to rest on the trembling man's shoulder. "It'll be okay, Fred." His words offered a lifeline of reassurance, a rare softness in the usually stoic detective. Dillette, drawing from a wellspring of courage buried deep within, nodded in acknowledgement. Brogan retrieved his coat and hat, an unspoken signal that they were embarking on a journey into the unknown. Together, this unlikely trio set forth a constellation of emotions guiding their steps as they left behind the safety of the precinct for the darkness that awaited at Dillette's home. The trio embarked on a drive across town, the vehicle's tires rolling to a halt upon reaching a housing development where uniform houses stood in orderly rows. Each house was a carbon copy of the next, small and modestly built, housing merely 2 bedrooms, a solitary bathroom, and a compact kitchen. They occupied plots of land so minuscule it was as if the entire community was built on postage stamp-sized lots. This residential expansion had been conceived through the city's planning office, an ambitious endeavor aimed at steering growth away from the cramped confines of the downtown area. In theory, this move was intended to curtail crime, as the city planners believed that dispersing the population would mitigate the problem. However, reality painted a different picture. The aftermath of this urban strategy had inadvertently driven honest, hard-working individuals away, leaving behind a vacuum that was rapidly filled by the poor and the desperate. What was meant to be a solution had, in fact, become a catalyst for the very issue it sought to address. Crime was on the rise within these once-ordered neighborhoods, rendering the initial intentions of the city planners as nothing more than misguided conjecture. They approached Dillette's residence, a shadowy silhouette against the backdrop of the night. The door stood ajar, its yawning gap a silent invitation. Rick, driven by a blend of curiosity and duty, ventured inside. Yet, as his foot crossed the threshold, an overwhelming rush of sensations engulfed him. The vision, an untamed torrent of images, tore through his mind with a ferocity that echoed in his skull, sending shock waves of pain radiating through his head. His steps faltered, a strangled gasp escaping his lips as he stumbled forward, attempting to wrest control over the relentless onslaught of imagery. The cascade of fragmented pictures played out at breakneck speed, each image jostling for dominance, threatening to consume him entirely. Just as abruptly as it began, the deluge ceased, the torrent of images dissipating into the ether. Rick stood there, shaken and breathless, his gaze fixed on the darkness before him. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of anticipation hanging in the balance. What secrets lay concealed within these walls, waiting to be unearthed? Only time would tell as the night unfolded its mysteries. "You okay, Vargo?" Brogan's voice cut through the charged atmosphere, concern lacing his words as he regarded Rick. Rick's breath was ragged, his pulse still echoing the rapid cadence of his mind. "Yeah, but there's definitely something here, and it's mad as hell," he replied, the intensity of the experience etched into his expression. Dillette, like a reluctant traveler entering uncharted territory, cautiously crossed the threshold. The house, once familiar, now felt like an alien landscape he had never encountered. His hand clutched his gun, trembling with both apprehension and the desperate need to assert some semblance of control. "That isn't going to help." Rick's tone remained composed, a voice of reason in the midst of uncertainty. Whatever is here can't be shot. Dilette's grip on the weapon didn't waver. Just the same, I'll feel better, he responded, his conviction unfaltering. Despite the chilling unknown that enveloped them, the firearm served as a symbol of his diminishing control over the situation. Rick nodded, his resolve unwavering as he moved forward through the house, guided by an unseen current of purpose. The path led him to a hallway, a conduit into the heart of the mystery that lay before them. "Which door is your bedroom?" Rick inquired, his voice a steady anchor in the midst of uncertainty. "The one on the left." Dilette's response carried a hint of hesitance, his form still anchored near the front door, an emblem of his apprehension. Rick ventured further down the hallway, an intangible force gradually taking shape, an energy that pressed against him like an insistent wind. It was as if the very air was charged with an otherworldly power, pushing against his progress, seeking to thwart his advance. With each step, the resistance grew like an invisible tide intent on holding him back. As Rick arrived at the entrance of the designated room, the door suddenly slammed shut, a startling sound that reverberated through the hallway. He seized the knob, determination evident in his grip as he attempted to push it open. However, an invisible barrier held firm, the door unyielding in the face of his efforts. "Brogan, give me a hand," Rick's voice was urgent, a blend of determination and desperation as he turned to his fellow detective for assistance. The two of them positioned themselves before the unyielding door, their collective force and willpower channeled into the attempt to breach the obstinate barrier. Despite their combined strength, the door remained steadfast, as if the very fabric of reality had solidified against their efforts. A sudden shudder rippled through the house, a palpable echo of the invisible forces at play. In an eerie symphony, the door to the adjacent bedroom slammed shut, the reverberations an unsettling reminder that they were not alone in this unsettling struggle. Brogan, unrelenting in his determination, stepped forward to confront the second door, but his efforts were met with the same unyielding resistance. Frustration lingered in the air, mingling with the ever-growing sense of unease. In the midst of this tense confrontation, another vision descended upon Rick, as if an invisible hand had hurled a brick into the recesses of his mind. The images were grotesque, a torrent of raw emotions and nightmarish scenes that flooded his senses with a horrific intensity. He grappled with the onslaught, the vividness of the experience inflicting an agonizing grip on his consciousness. A cry of anguish tore from his lips, a primal response to the assault on his psyche. Brogan reacted swiftly, his grip firm as he pulled Rick away from the doorway, the concern etched in his features. Together, they retreated from the volatile environment, each step a retreat from the tumultuous current of the house's enigmatic energy. As they made their way outside the house, the cool rush of external air greeted them, a grounding force that served to recalibrate their senses. Gradually, the searing pain receded, leaving behind a lingering sensation of disorientation. The trio stood there, a collective embodiment of bewilderment and uncertainty, as the saga of inexplicable events unfolded before them. With a resounding thud, the front door slammed shut behind them, its impact reverberating through the air with a force that seemed to defy the laws of nature. "My God!" Brogan's exclamation hung in the air, laden with a mix of disbelief and dread. "What the hell is going on?" Rick's breaths came in heavy gusts, his mind still reeling from the residual effects of the visions. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice a testament to the weight of the unknown. "But I intend to find out." A Haunted Past, Part 3. The following morning, Rick Vargo's determination led him to the heart of knowledge, the city library. The old building carried an air of scholarly solemnity, and its vast shelves held secrets and stories waiting to be unraveled. Rick had a purpose in mind: to delve into research, to seek answers that would illuminate the enigmatic events that had transpired in Delette's house. His steps echoed softly on the well-worn floors as he made his way to the reference section, a realm of dusty tomes and hushed whispers. Pulling out a chair at a wooden table, he settled in with an air of anticipation, ready to unveil the hidden threads that connected the present to the past. His fingers traced the pages of history, searching for records that held the key to the unsettling occurrences. The hours slipped away as he painstakingly combed through books, old maps, and faded documents. Then, like a puzzle piece snapping into place, he stumbled upon a trail of information that promised insight. Records spoke of the very area where Delette's house now stood, a place that had once been a sprawling campsite for a people known as the Illiniwek. These Native Americans were more than just an ancient memory. They had been a formidable nation, a dominant force that held sway over the expanse of the Mississippi Valley. Their influence was vast, with 12 branch tribes collectively forming their populous society. As he read, the echoes of the past grew louder. The Illiniwek had thrived independently, their governance untouched by external forces until the emergence of French traders. The colonial intruders gradually encroached upon their territory and, over time, displaced the Illiniwek from their ancestral lands. The story was one of resistance and eventual displacement, a narrative of cultural upheaval. A connection began to take shape in Rick's mind, a thread that linked the house, Delette's presence, and the spirits that seemed to haunt the very foundations of the structure. Delette, of French descent, could be a descendant of those who had once come to the area as traders. But why would an ancient Illiniwek spirit harbor such intentions toward him? The puzzle pieces were there, but the picture remained incomplete. Driven by the quest for understanding, Rick's next destination took him outside the city to a small farm nestled amidst the countryside. The name Wagosh Key Way held significance. This friend, a member of the Peoria tribal nation and a local medicine man, was a repository of wisdom that transcended the boundaries of time and culture. The farm exuded a rustic charm, a haven of tranquility away from the bustling city. Rick's knuckles rapped gently on the front door, the sound a harbinger of the inquiries and revelations that awaited within. "Come in, my friend Rick." A welcoming voice beckoned from within. The threshold of Wagosh Keyway's abode was crossed with anticipation as the dwelling presented itself as a simple cocoon of wisdom, tucked away from the world's tumultuous pace. The interior bore the marks of its owner's heritage, though subtly so. Sparse furnishings and a collection of artifacts spoke of Keyway's Native American lineage. Amidst the unadorned elegance, Keyway sat at his kitchen table, an aura of quiet authority exuding from him. His face bore the wrinkles of years lived with purpose and wisdom, and his eyes held the glint of an elder who had seen the passage of time. A soft smile creased his lips as Rick entered, his presence welcomed with a sense of recognition that transcended words. "Hello, Key," Rick greeted, settling into the chair opposite him. "How are you feeling?" The elderly medicine man's response carried the weight of both his age and his bluntness. "That's a stupid question," he retorted with a hint of amusement. "I'm 87 years old. How do you think I feel?" A sheepish smile tugged at Rick's lips, acknowledging the truth in Keyway's unfiltered response. Small talk held little appeal for the old man, whose wisdom surpassed the superficial. "Key, I needed to come see you." Rick began, his words cautious as he broached the purpose of his visit. "I know why you are here, my friend Rick," Keeway interjected, his voice carrying the sagacity of one who understood the intricacies of human nature. "And it is a very difficult matter indeed." Curiosity danced in Rick's eyes, an eager desire to understand what lay beneath the enigma he sought to unravel. "Why is that?" he inquired, his tone both respectful and earnest, a seeker yearning for enlightenment. "The Frenchman is in grave danger," Keeway began, his voice carrying a weight that reflected the seriousness of his message. A knowing glint illuminated his eyes, as if he had glimpsed the threads of destiny intertwining. "I had a vision of your coming last night, a revelation born from the tapestry of dreams and spirits." Rick leaned forward, captivated by the intensity of Keeway's words. The rustic kitchen seemed to shrink in significance as the words of the medicine man painted a vivid picture in his mind. "In this vision," Keeway continued, his voice assuming a cadence that drew Rick into the very heart of his experience, "I witnessed a monstrous entity. It stood large as a calf, its ominous presence casting a shadow across the land. Its visage was both fearsome and surreal. A pair of horns adorned its head, resembling those of a deer. Fiery red eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, while a mane akin to a lion's framed its face." Rick's imagination conjured the image, the creature's unsettling characteristics etching themselves into his thoughts. Keeway continued, his description painting a mosaic of the fantastical and the terrifying. "A long, serpentine tail wound sinuously around its form, a living appendage that carried menace within its coils." Rick's senses were tingling, his mind capturing the intricate details that Keeway wove into the fabric of his vision. "In its grasp," Keeway intoned, his voice somber, "it held two figures, a Frenchman and a woman. The Frenchman's plight was evident, his vulnerability stark against the creature's formidable might. The woman, too, was captive, ensnared in the clutches of this enigmatic monster." Rick's thoughts raced, his heart pounding as he grasped the urgency of Keeway's words. "Yet, it was the tale that held my gaze." Keeway's voice grew heavier, the weight of prophecy and insight heavy in his words. "Bound around the throat of a dark-skinned man, whose anger radiated like a smoldering fire. The creature's intent seemed to channel through this man, intertwining with his very soul. The atmosphere seemed charged with an electric tension as Rick absorbed the intricate connections that Keeway's vision had unveiled. Then, Keeway's voice grew hushed, his words a whispered invocation of fate. "I beheld you, Rick. In the midst of this nightmarish tableau, you emerged as a beacon of defiance. Flames erupted from your mouth, spewing forth with an elemental fury, yet the monster remained unscathed. It was as if a shroud of invulnerability encased it." The gravity of the situation hung heavily in the air, the foreboding nature of the vision casting a shadow over the room. "Behind the monster," Keeway concluded, his voice carrying an air of forewarning, "loomed a shadow, a spectral entity driven by a hunger for vengeance." Rick's mind whirred, attempting to assimilate the haunting images and their implications. In the presence of the medicine man's revelations, he felt a sense of purpose, a determination to confront the unknown forces that threatened the Frenchman and the woman held captive by the monstrous specter. "Quite a vision," Vargo said, perplexed. "I have my moments," Keeway smiled. "You cannot stop the dark man alone. You need the help that only the spirit world can give. I shall go with you to this place, to stop the Anishinaabe from taking his revenge. But there is a secret that only the Frenchman can know. Until that secret is revealed before council, There is nothing I can do. Are you saying that we must bring a council to the house? Vargo's eyes widened with the concept. No, they will be there when the time is needed. Let's go now. Kiwei's voice carried the resonance of ages past, his words laden with a sense of inevitability. With deliberate movements, he gathered items from a wooden chest that bore intricate carvings. Each etch was a tribute to generations of wisdom. The chest itself seemed to exhale the essence of ancient spirits. Vargo watched with a mixture of reverence and anticipation as Kiwei's preparations took form. The artifacts he retrieved seemed to hold within them the echoes of distant memories, each piece resonating with the vibrations of the unseen world. There was a ceremonial feather adorned with vibrant hues, hinting at connections to the avian realm that bridged earth and sky. A bundle of fragrant herbs, meticulously wrapped in twine, exuded an aroma that spoke of healing and protection. As they departed from the sacred confines of Kiwei's abode, the world outside seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging the gravity of their purpose. The journey back to town was marked by a sense of shared determination, the car's engine humming in harmony with the ancient forces they sought to align with. Vargo stopped by a payphone and called Brogan. "Brogan," he said when the call was answered, "gather Dillette and meet us at the house." As the group converged at the house, the setting exuded an air of heightened significance, as if the surroundings themselves recognized the gravity of the impending event. Anticipation seemed to hang in the atmosphere, a mingling of hope and apprehension that lingered like an invisible veil. Kiwei's presence commanded attention, his every gesture imbued with purpose and intention. The afternoon sun cast long shadows, enveloping the scene in a warm, golden glow. A sense of age-old wisdom seemed to settle upon the landscape, bridging the gap between distant epochs and the present moment. Initiating the proceedings with an air of ancient solemnity, Kiwei embarked on a chant that resonated with a timbre carrying echoes of generations long past. His voice wove through the air like a river, carrying with it the weight of centuries and the fervent plea for intervention from realms unseen. His hands moved with fluid grace, shaping the energies around him into intricate patterns that seemed to connect the tangible world with the intangible forces beyond. As the chant gained momentum, there was an almost imperceptible response from the land itself, a subtle vibration that seemed to resonate through the ground beneath their feet. It was as though the very earth was acknowledging the call, lending its own voice to the chorus that Kiwei was orchestrating. Seating himself upon the grass, Kiwei assumed a posture that almost seemed to merge with the earth beneath him. His closed eyes conveyed deep concentration, a meditative stance that reflected his connection to forces beyond the immediate realm. "What's this all about?" asked Brogan as he watched the old man, skepticism etching his features. "This is a friend of mine who can help," Vargo replied, his tone carrying a mixture of urgency and conviction. "Some of that mumbo-jumbo you were talking about." "Look," Brogan's voice began, laden with hesitation and disbelief. "No, you look," Vargo interjected, his words asserting a firmness born of necessity. "If Dillette wants his wife back, this is our best shot. Think of it as going to court. Kiwei is your defense attorney and a damn good one. If anyone can bring her back, he can. For once, just shut up and listen." Vargo could sense the words hung on the tip of Brogan's tongue, ready to form a rebuttal, but an unspoken recognition seemed to flicker in his eyes. A silent understanding passed between them, a recognition that the stakes were too high to dismiss this avenue without exploration. Kiwei's movements were deliberate, his actions steeped in ancient ritual. With the measured precision of one who had conducted such ceremonies countless times before, he dug a small hole in the dirt, the earth yielding to his touch, as if recognizing his authority. From a worn leather bag, he produced an object, its significance hidden to the uninitiated. A sense of reverence enveloped the scene, as if the very air held its breath in anticipation of the unfolding events. There was a quiet power in Kiwei's actions, a connection to forces beyond the comprehension of modern minds. As he buried the object within the earth, the act carried a weight of symbolism, an invocation of unseen energies. Then Kiwei stood, the weight of expectation heavy in the air. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with mysteries and potential dangers. Yet there was a unity in their purpose, an unspoken pact to confront the enigmatic forces that had taken hold. "What was that?" Brogan asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of curiosity and unease. "That is to keep the spirits here so that they do not wander," the old man replied, his steps purposeful as he moved toward the house. The group followed him, crossing the threshold and entering the house that had borne witness to the mysterious events. Inside, the aged medicine man closed his eyes and initiated a rhythmic shaking of a bone rattle, its sound reverberating through the air in tandem with his chants. A palpable energy seemed to infuse the room, as if the very walls held echoes of forgotten history. "There is a powerful spirit here that wants revenge," Kiwei continued, his voice a melodic undertone to the rattle's rhythm. His gaze seemed to penetrate the shadows that lingered within the corners of the room. His dark shadow drapes like a blanket. "Bring the Frenchman to me." Dilette approached Kiwei, his apprehension manifesting in the tense set of his shoulders and the wary glances he cast around the room. The medicine man's hand gently came to rest upon Dilette's head, the touch both gentle and commanding. "There is a secret that you must reveal for the healing to begin," Kiwei intoned, his voice carrying an authority that resonated deep within Dilette's core. "What secret?" Dilette's skepticism colored his voice, a mixture of frustration and desperation woven into his words. He turned to Brogan, seeking clarity in the midst of the mysticism that surrounded them. "Brogan, how is this going to help get my wife back?" "You must trust in the way." The medicine man's words cut through the skepticism, his tone unwavering. "There is an atonement to be made, or your wife is lost. Are you willing to make this sacrifice of atonement?" Dilette's confusion was palpable, his inner turmoil evident in the furrow of his brow and the conflict that danced within his eyes. Standing at the precipice of the unknown, he grappled with a decision that held the weight of restoring what had been lost, all the while confronting the enigmatic path that lay ahead. "I'd do anything to bring my wife back," he finally uttered, a declaration that carried the echoes of a heart torn between hope and uncertainty. "Be careful what you agree to, Frenchman. You may not like the consequences. Now come with me." Kiwei's voice held a weight of caution as he beckoned them forward. Leading the group, the medicine man guided them into the very bedroom from which Janice had vanished. Stepping within, he directed his steps to the room's center, where the bed frame stood. "This must be moved." Following his instruction, they removed the bed from the room, leaving it bare. Upon their return, they found Kiwei seated on the floor, adorned with a wreath of feathers encircling his head. Across his chest lay a staff, and in his hand he held the bone rattle. "Sit beside me," his command was issued with an air of authority, "and do not speak unless spoken to." They complied, positioning themselves beside the medicine man as he initiated a slow, melodic chant. The rhythm of the chant gradually grew, accompanied by the rhythmic shaking of the bone rattle. "All who have hearkened to the world beyond our sight, I call upon the elders of the 12 tribes to our fire." Kiwei's voice resonated, invoking an ancestral presence that transcended the material realm. "Let us cling to our traditions, as taught by our grandfathers, as to what we should believe. I call upon Kitchis Manitoa to give his blessing to this gathering so that we may share from the calumet for a restored peace with the tortured soul that holds this land." With deliberate reverence, he produced an ornamental pipe from his bag and placed it on the floor before him. "Come, let us share this tobacco and bring peace once again to this ground that bears the blood of our fathers." As if in response to his invocation, a mist began to gather in the air before them, weaving an ethereal tapestry in the space. Gazing into the mist, they beheld the apparitions of 12 men adorned in animal skins and crowned with feathered wreaths. The solemn visages of these ancestral spirits held a presence that transcended time itself. Despite the shock of the encounter, Delette's breath caught in a gasp, only to be quelled by Kiwei's reassuring touch. "It will be all right. These are the spirits of the 12 nations. They are here to help you." Amid the hushed atmosphere, one of the spirit figures rose from his seated position, his voice uttering unfamiliar words that resonated with an ancient cadence. Kiwei acted as an interpreter, bridging the linguistic gap. "He says they have come from a long sleep. They have come in honor of their ancestors, so that the world may find peace." The spirit figure resumed his seated position, a sense of solemn purpose etched upon his features. With the spirit's blessing evident, Kiwei rose to his feet and entered the circle formed by the group. His presence carried a blend of authority and reverence. "I call for the name of the one who has chosen war upon this Frenchman. I ask him to stand within this circle and stake his claim on this battle before the 12 nations." The air held a charged tension, as if the very fabric of the spiritual realm awaited the response that would unfold. "I am Mohegan Kika," a voice resounded through the mist, guiding the emergence of a figure who materialized in the center of the scene. Stepping forth, he revealed himself as a youthful man, adorned with intricate tattoos that decorated his skin like tales of a distant past. His visage was further embellished, painted crimson from his forehead to his shoulders. In his hand, he held an arrow, a weapon that resonated with its own stories, while a knife was secured tightly at his waist, a symbol of readiness and determination. The spiritual presence exuded by his form was undeniable, a manifestation from a world beyond the earthly realm. "I bring the blood of my wife to the door of this Frenchman." Delette's voice broke through the charged air, a mix of desperation and disbelief, as he tried to refute the accusation leveled against him. "What? I never hurt your wife. How could I? Kiwei, his countenance now etched with a mixture of sternness and frustration, turned his gaze upon Delette. "Quiet!" he commanded with authority, his voice demanding immediate obedience. "You have no right to speak yet." The medicine man's intervention, a reprimand cloaked in spiritual weight, silenced Delette's outburst, positioning the scene for the revelations that were to come. One of the 12 men, a figure with an air of ancient wisdom, acknowledged the young warrior's presence with a solemn nod. "We will hear your words." His voice carried a resonance that seemed to echo from time immemorial. Within the sacred circle, Mohegan Kika's restless pacing mirrored the contained power of a lion, caged yet exuding an aura of potential violence, a feral energy ready to be unleashed. His steps held the cadence of a heart weighed down by the burden of a story that demanded to be told. His voice resonated with both sorrow and a smoldering rage as he embarked on his narrative, each word falling like a stone into the pool of their collective consciousness. Mino Minwashin was to be my wife. That was until the French came. His voice trembled with a mix of melancholy and wrath, each syllable reverberating with the echoes of a life torn apart. She would do their laundry by the river for pelts to trade. One day I went to see her as she worked. Through the trees, I heard her voice calling for help. I ran as fast as I could until her screams filled the air around me. When I got to the river, I saw a man sitting on top of her naked body, holding her by the neck. She was struggling against him as I rushed to help her. Before I could get to them, her body went limp. The tale was woven with words that painted a vivid tableau of tragedy, each detail etching a heart-wrenching image in the minds of those who listened. Mahigan's pacing, akin to a predator within the confinements of a cage, mirrored the conflict within his soul. The desperate urge for justice juxtaposed with the weight of his powerlessness. The Frenchman saw me, pulled out his pistol, and shot me in the belly, knocking me to the ground. I crawled to Minwashin as the life slipped from my body. I looked into her lifeless eyes as the Frenchman stood above us, laughing at what he had done. As he recounted the horrifying climax of the tale, his voice carried a haunting lament, each word a brushstroke on the canvas of shared sorrow. For many years, I have suffered between the world of the living and the dead. My anger held me to this ground until he came. With a bitter finger, Mahigan pointed an accusatory gesture toward Dilette, his tone holding the intensity of generations wronged. He holds the stain of his ancestors. He has the blood of my wife upon him. I ask that you allow me this revenge, so my soul may finally rest. As the young warrior stood back, his visage a tapestry woven with hatred and pain, the tension in the circle was palpable. Dilette, the focus of Mahigan's wrath, sat in a state of bewildered shock, his own emotions a turbulent whirlwind of disbelief and anxiety. The exchange between Vargo and Brogan, laden with unspoken questions and uncertainties, mirrored the intricate tapestry of emotions unraveling before them. In the midst of the charged atmosphere, Kiwei motioned for Dilette to rise, a gesture laden with gravity and purpose. As the Frenchman nervously stood, Mahigan snorted and spat at the ground by his feet. Kiwei's voice, imbued with an air of ancient wisdom, cut through the charged atmosphere like a soft gust of wind carrying whispers of ages past. "What have you to say to this?" he asked, directing his gaze toward Dilette, whose form trembled, as if the very weight of history bore down on him. Dilette's voice quivered, a reflection of the turmoil within him. I don't know," he stammered, grappling with the enormity of the accusations and the unyielding presence of the warrior's gaze. Mahigan Kika, a figure whose very essence seemed woven from the threads of vengeance and suffering, observed Dilette with a mix of disdain and triumphant satisfaction. "See how the guilt makes his body tremble in fear," he remarked, his words infused with a mix of scorn and vindication. Yet, despite the tremors that coursed through Dilette's frame, he held his ground with a tenacity born of desperation and resolve. "Afraid, yes," he conceded, his voice now steadier, laced with an undercurrent of unwavering determination. "But not from guilt. I don't know what my ancestor did or didn't do, but I do know that my wife was not responsible," he declared, his words a fervent plea for justice to breach the divide of time. "If you must have your revenge, then take it out on me. Leave her out of it," he beseeched, his eyes locking onto Mahigan's, an unspoken vow of sacrifice. Amid the clash of emotions, Kiwei's gaze remained fixed on the two men before him. His countenance, a canvas of contemplation, bore the weight of a decision shaped by forces greater than the present moment. "Mahigan, you took the Frenchman's woman from him," he inquired, his voice carrying an undertone of somber reflection. "Yes," Mahigan answered, his pride unapologetically mingled with a deep-seated satisfaction. "And you told us that the ancestor of the Frenchman took your wife," Keeway continued, his voice a steady current weaving threads of fate together. "Yes." "Then it seems your revenge is complete, yet your soul still rests uneasy." "Why?" Keeway's question, a beacon of introspection, cut to the heart of the matter, unraveling layers of pain and vendetta that spanned across time and space. "I do not know," Mahigan's response, though laden with the weight of countless restless nights and unending anger, carried within it a glimmer of vulnerability, the crack in the armor of his implacable resolve. Keeway's voice, like a gentle breeze laden with wisdom, swept through the charged air, intertwining with the tendrils of time and unspoken emotions. "Could it be that your anger has bound you to this ground? An anger that makes you hate so much that you cannot move on?" His words held the weight of ages, probing the depths of Mahigan's heart as the old medicine man approached, his hand resting gently upon the warrior's shoulder. In that touch, the currents of past and present converged. "Is it the Frenchman that holds you, or your own anger that keeps you from joining the great circle with Kitch's Manitoa?" The question, softly spoken yet resonant, hung in the air like a mist, shrouding the figure of Mahigan. His eyes, once fiery with a vengeance, now mirrored a profound introspection. "I do not know," Mahigan admitted, his voice a mixture of uncertainty and yearning as his gaze met Keeway's steady eyes. "Is it not our way that if a man takes your horse, you may take one of his? If he stabs your foot, are you not to stab his foot? Our traditions, as given to us by our fathers, say that, to keep balance, what someone takes, we may take. What someone does to us, we may do to them." Keeway's words bore the weight of cultural heritage, resonating with ancient echoes. "You have done this, but still, your soul is not at peace. Why?" "I do not know," Mahigan's voice cracked, revealing the cracks in the armor of his rage. The arrow he clenched dropped from his grasp, as if his very grip on vengeance was faltering. "I called to my spirit wolf, but he has forsaken me. I only wish to see Mino Minwashin again, to be with her. She is my wife." "Is she your wife?" Keeway's inquiry, softly posed, seemed to slice through the emotional fog, exposing layers of truth long buried beneath the surface. "Yes," Mahigan answered, his voice unwavering, yet laden with an undercurrent of uncertainty that flickered across his features. He stood, grappling with his emotions and the weight of his past. Was the ceremony performed? Keeway's words, laden with the gravitas of tradition and spiritual insight, hovered like a bridge between past and present. Mahigan's gaze flitted, uncertain, between the circle of elders and the figures gathered around him. His response was laden with doubt. No, there was no ceremony, but there was going to be. With a touch both tender and unwavering, Keeway's hand found the warrior's face, holding it with a gentleness that contrasted with the enormity of the moment. His voice, a near whisper, caressed Mahigan's ear. "Did she ever agree to be your wife?" The warrior's features contorted with the inner struggle caught between his anguished desire and the revelations unfolding. She would have, but I never got the chance." Mahigan's words erupted like a confession tearing free from his heart. His defiance was now mingled with sorrow, and his form crumpled as he fell to the floor, a cascade of grief that echoed through time. "I never got the chance," Kiwei's gaze shifted to the solemn assembly of the 12 nations, his eyes carrying both the weight of a sage's wisdom and the hope of resolution. This proud warrior had no wife, so by our tradition, he has no right to take from this man. I ask you to decide. His voice held a respectful authority as he directed their attention to the heart of the matter. The medicine man's glance then softened as he looked upon Mahigan Kika, his gaze a mix of empathy and understanding for the sorrowful soul who had unveiled his torment. With a heavy sigh, the old medicine man bowed his head as if carrying the burden of their collective history. His movements were marked by a solemn reverence as he seated himself, acknowledging the weight of the council's decision. The 12 nations whispered amongst themselves, the winds of their deliberation swirling in the air like the murmurs of an ancient forest. One among them, a figure marked by experience and the wisdom of years, rose from his place. Stepping into the center of the circle, his presence was a beacon of authority amidst the hushed assembly. "Stand before us, Frenchman and Mahigan Kika," the elder intoned, his voice carrying the gravitas of tradition and the echo of ancestral voices. Both men obeyed, moving to the center as summoned, their paths converging in the heart of a sacred circle. "Mahigan Kika, your Manitou, the wolf, has been with you always. Only you have not heard his voice, because your anger has stilled the wind around you. Once your anger is gone, the wolf will speak to you again." His words resonated like the whispers of spirits carried on a breeze. "Know this as we make our decision known to you." The elder's eyes bore into Mahigan, reflecting a mix of compassion and firmness, a testament to the solemnity of the moment. "Now give me your war symbol," he requested, his hand outstretched to receive the arrow that Mahigan held. The young warrior complied, surrendering the arrow with a gesture that seemed to mark the end of an era. "We, the 12 nations, agree that you have much hurt in your heart, and that the right to have Mino Minwashin as a wife was taken from you." The elder's words resonated through the circle, a verdict handed down from the collective soul of nations. "We also agree with Kiwei that since you had no wife to take, you have no claim on the wife of this Frenchman. We, as a nation, agree." With a solemn grace, he snapped the arrow in half, a symbolic gesture that mirrored the breaking of the chains of vengeance. Each half was presented, one to Dilette, the other to Mahigan, the remnants of a past undone. "The claim of revenge is denied." The elder's voice held a mix of resolution and mercy, his gaze softening as it shifted to Mahigan, the warrior who had carried the weight of his anger and pain. "Come with us to the great circle. Become one with your nation again." The words were an invitation, an embrace extended to a wounded soul, a chance for healing and restoration. With unity, the men of the 12 nations rose from their places, an embodiment of collective support. Mahigan, his face still streaked with the tears of his grief, moved towards them, his steps marked by a newfound surrender. The mist that had gathered grew denser, wrapping around them like a cocoon of ancestral spirits as they began to fade from view, guided by the ethereal hands of time and tradition. Dilette's confusion gave way to a plea that burst forth from his lips, an anguished outcry that echoed the depths of his desperation. "Wait, is that it? What about my wife?" His voice trembled with a mixture of fear and hope, every syllable a testament to the torment of uncertainty that had gripped him. He rushed to Brogan as if seeking solace in the familiar presence of his friend, his grip on reality slipping with each passing moment. "What about Janice? For the love of God, they can't just—" "Frederick!" A voice, soft yet piercing, called out from the veils of mist. The sound was a lifeline, a fragile thread of connection that tugged at Delette's heartstrings, momentarily silencing his desperate cries. He turned towards the source, his eyes widening in a crescendo of emotions that surged through him like a tidal wave. Amidst the ethereal haze emerged the figure he had yearned for with every fiber of his being. His wife, Janice. An intoxicating mix of disbelief and joy washed over him, rendering him momentarily speechless in the presence of his beloved. It was as if the very essence of hope had materialized before his eyes. Delette's feet carried him with an urgency he could not contain, closing the gap between them in swift strides. As he enveloped her in a tight embrace, tears streamed down his cheeks, mingling with the unrestrained smile that now adorned his face. "Are you all right? Let me look at you," he whispered, his voice a mixture of relief and lingering disbelief. Janice's confusion was palpable, her brows furrowing as she tried to make sense of the surreal reunion that had unfolded before her. The words were both a question and a plea, a yearning for clarity in the midst of the inexplicable. Her eyes searched her husband's face, seeking answers and reassurance that the tumultuous events had not irreparably torn apart the fabric of their lives. "I'm fine. But what happened?" she finally voiced, her voice tinged with a mix of bewilderment and curiosity, as if the very air around her held secrets she was yet to uncover. Amid the mist-laden atmosphere, the culmination of their quest brought forth a remarkable transformation in Delette's demeanor. His voice quivered with a triumphant happiness as he posed a question that held the essence of the miraculous. "You don't remember?" The words seemed to dance with a hint of incredulous delight, a melody of joy that had found its harmony within the labyrinth of emotions that flowed through him. His chuckle emerged like a whisper, a laughter that was interwoven with sheer relief and astonishment at the unexpected turn of events. "She doesn't remember." The realization was met with a mix of reactions from the assembled individuals, each absorbing the truth in their own way. Vargo's response was measured, his tone bearing the weight of the peculiar circumstances that had unfolded. "That may be best," he conceded, casting a glance towards Keyway and Brogan, a silent acknowledgement that the time had come for them to retreat from the enigmatic scene. "Yes," agreed Keyway, his movements deliberate as he carefully gathered his belongings and secured them within the worn leather bag that held his medicine-manic tools. His expression held a sense of serenity, as if the burden he had shouldered had finally been relinquished and a profound understanding had been achieved. The shadow has lifted from this place. All is as it should be. Brogan, ever the realist among the surreal, voiced his sentiments with a tinge of bewilderment still lingering in his words. "Great. Vargo, someday you'll have to explain to me just what the hell happened here." His voice carried a mix of curiosity and exasperation, his features etched with a combination of bafflement and anticipation. "I would try," Vargo replied with a playful smile, the lightness in his tone mirroring the newfound sense of resolution that permeated the air. "But I don't think a blubber brain like yours could understand it." A mock threat rippled through Brogan's words, carrying the camaraderie that defined their interactions. "Oh yeah?" he retorted, a playful glint in his eyes. "How about if I kick you right in your brains and see if I can get the information that way?" A hint of an amused grin danced at the corners of Keyway's mouth as he watched their banter unfold. "I'll wait for you two in the car." Thank you for listening to A Haunted Past, a tale from the Skull Hunter book series. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and explore more thrilling adventures on our channel. Until next time, stay safe and keep the shadows at bay. If you'd like to read more of Rick Vargo's adventures, The Skull Hunter book series is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many more. The link is in the description.